Welcome back to the Simulator series. In today's episode, we are going to be scripting the Rebirth shop. As always, you guys do enjoy the video or it does help you out, make sure you smash the like button, also to the subscribe button, and turn post notifications on so you get notified every time I upload a brand new episode. I also have a Patreon if you guys like to support me and gain access to all the scripts and the game file I made during this episode. There's a link down below in the description, and you guys are going to check that out. With that being said, let's hop right into it. Now, before we begin scripting, you guys are going to want to go down below in the description, and there's going to be a link to this Patreon post, which is completely free and accessible by everybody. If you've been watching the entire series so far, you already know what to do. You're going to want to click on assets.zip and download the zip file, which contains a bunch of models that we're going to be using inside of our game. Once you've downloaded those, you can go back to Studio, and then we're going to right click on Workspace and click on Insert from File. We'll then go to wherever we save that zip file to, and then we'll select the Rebirth shop.rbxm and insert that directly into our game. Then if we go ahead and focus on it, we can see that it is inside of our workspace. And of course, we want to move this around a little bit. So what I'm going to first do is set the UI visibility to false so that we no longer see the UI and we can easily move this model around. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and delete one of these second pet indexes, and then I'm also going to delete this tree as well, and then we can rotate it and reposition it a little bit, and I think that actually looks pretty decent. Now one of the last things that we want to do is throw this inside of the spawn folder, and then we're going to duplicate it, and we're going to hit Control X to cut that directly from there. We'll close the spawn folder, and then we'll go inside of the islands folder, and then I'm going to paste this directly into the Arctic folder by hitting Control, Shift, and V. And now that it's inside of here, let's go ahead and actually drag it up to the Arctic island. And here we are. We now have it on the Arctic island. Let's go ahead and move it over a little bit and reposition it. Cool. So I think that looks pretty good on the Arctic island. Let's then delete the Rebirth shop hitbox part because we're no longer going to be using that. And then we can duplicate this one more time. And this time we're going to put that inside of the volcano folder. And then let's actually put this on the volcano island. And there we go. We've now put that on the volcano island. Let's also delete the Rebirth shop hitbox here as well. And now we have all the models set up. Now to begin scripting, we're going to actually update the Rebirth config. So we're going to go inside of the replicated storage, inside of the configs folder, and open up the Rebirth module script. Now inside of here, first of all, I'm going to start off by rearranging this a little bit. I like to group all my functions together, so that's why I'm kind of moving this table above them. And now that we've moved that table, the next thing we're going to do is create a variable inside of here. We're going to say rebirthconfig.shop, and that's going to be equal to a table. Now for the keys of this table, we're actually going to be using area and island names. So for instance, we have the spawn, and that's going to be set to another table. And inside of this table, we're going to have two keys. The first key is going to be pets, which is going to be equal to another table. And the second key is going to be called buns, which is also going to be equal to a table as well. Now going to our pets table, for the key inside of here, we want to use a pet's name. So we're going to use a dog pet, and that's going to be equal to another table. Now inside of here is where we're going to be able to enter most of the properties that we want to for the pet. So for instance, we can specify its rarity, which is going to be set to rare. If we wanted to, we could also make the pet golden as well. So we could set golden to true. And if the pet's golden, we also want to make sure that it is shiny. So that's why we'll set that to true as well. We could even set enchantments or levels and experience and other things like that inside of here as well. But I'm only going to set these three properties for right now. We're going to add one more property to this, which is going to be called price. And that's going to be set to 400. Now this property is not really a part of the pet instance. These properties such as the rarity, shiny, and golden are all properties of a pet instance. This price property is primarily only going to be used to decide how much it actually costs to purchase this pet from the shop. And then we'll use the normal pet instance properties when we actually create and give the pet to the player. Now additionally, you can add multiple pets inside of here if you wanted to. I would recommend just copying and pasting the dog pet, and then you could say cat pet as well with the same rarity, or you can change any of that information up. But inside of the spawn shop, we're only going to allow for one pet to be displayed here, and that's going to be the dog. Then we can go to the buns table, and for the keys inside of here, we're going to use numbers, but we're going to make those numbers a string. And now for the value of this, we're actually going to set it to a specific number, which is going to be its price. So for instance, a 50 rebirth bun is going to cost 500. And the currency that we're going to be using for this whole rebirth shop is the gems currency, which you obtain from rebirthing in our game. Now an alternative way that you could set the value of each of the buns is by setting it to a table, and then you could have a price property inside of here, and then we could set that to 500, for example. That would make the price handling much similar to how we do with the pets, but at the same time, I couldn't think of any properties that I would ever want to have inside of here. That's why I'm fine with just setting this to 500. Although, you know what? This is a good lesson, and I like to play it safe because I've had these exact issues while developing before. Let's say, for instance, that we thought of a property that we actually wanted to add along with each of the buns. We would have to update and change a lot of the code anytime we actually handle these specific buns. Whereas if we compare that to the dogs table, we could add any extra property inside of here without really having to update any of our previous code. So like I said, even though I don't think we're ever going to add anything inside of here, you never know what the future holds, so we might as well add the price property in here, and we're going to set that to 500. Now, like I said, if we ever need to make changes and add more properties to this table in the future, it saves us a lot of time from having to update our previous code. Cool, so now we're pretty much finished with our first area shop. What we'll then do is copy and paste this entire shop, and then we'll set this one up for the Arctic zone. So for the pen side of here, we're going to reward a bunny, which is going to have an epic rarity. It's not going to be shiny or golden, and the price of it is going to be 401. Then for the bun, we're going to add a 75 bun. The price of this is going to be 501. And now we're done with the Arctic shop. We'll then copy and paste that one more time. And for the final shop we'll make is the volcano. This time we'll reward a cat pet, which is going to have a legendary rarity. And the price of it is going to be 402. Then for the buns, we're going to reward a 100 rebirth button. And that's going to cost 502. Cool. Now we're pretty much done with creating the entire shop table. But going a little bit further up in our script, we have this buns variable right here. Now when I originally created the rebirth buns system, I didn't really take into account buying rebirth buns from another shop. And considering how our system is set up, we have buns that we want to reward to the player inside of this table. And the way our code is set up is to really only identify the buns that are inside of this buttons table right here. So we want to change the system to make it a lot more flexible. So what we're going to do is create a variable called free buttons. That's going to be equal to a table. And inside of that table, we're going to copy all of these buns right here and paste those directly inside of there. These are all the buns which are free. That's why, of course, the variable is named free buns. And then we're going to delete the entire buns variable right there. Now that we've done that, let's go down to the bottom of our script and we're going to create a new function. Now this function is going to be called getBuns and it's not going to accept any arguments. We'll then create a variable called Rebirth and that's going to be equal to the free buns. Then we want to loop through our Rebirth shop variable. So the key is going to be the area while the index is just going to be called info inside of Rebirth config.shop do. And now that we're looping through each of the area shops, we then also want to loop through all the buns that are inside of the buns table as well. So we're going to say for button, comma button info in info.buttons do. And now that we're going through each of the buns, what we're going to do is we're going to say Rebirth and we're going to index that with the specific bun and we're going to set that equal to a table. And inside of this table, we're going to have a property called price, which is going to be equal to button info.price. And then finally, at the end of the function, after our for loops have finished, we're going to return the Rebirth variable, which is going to be a table of all the rebirth buns in our game. Now that we've created that function, we have to go through and update all of the code in our game, which uses the Rebirth config.buns variable. Now the first line of code that we can actually update is in the hasBun unlocked function. Instead of saying Rebirth configs.buns, we want to say Rebirth config.getBuns, and then we're just going to index that with the Rebirth bun. In addition to that, we can go ahead and copy Rebirth config and then hit Control Shift and F so that we can search through all of our code. And then we want to look for Rebirth config.buttons. Now when we look for that, we're actually not able to find anything, and that might be because sometimes when we require this module, we don't actually make the word plural. So we're going to say Rebirth config.buns, and now we can see some results right here. So we'll update this local script right here. And again, instead of saying Rebirth config.buns, we're going to say getBuns just like that. Then we can go to the server script right here. Again, instead of buns, we're going to say .getBuns. And then we also want to update the template module script right here as well to say .getBuns as well. And now that we've done that, we can go ahead and close the template. We can also close all the other scripts that we've updated as well. And now we're pretty much good with this config, so I'm going to close that as well. Next, what we want to do is actually update the islands config. So we're going to go ahead and open up that module script. Now inside of here, we want to create another variable, and this is going to be called island order. And we're going to set that equal to a blank table. Now inside of here, we want to make an array, and we want to create an array of all of the different areas in our game. Now, although this variable is called island order and the module script is called islands, we want to include spawn inside of here as well. So we're going to say spawn, then we'll say comma, and then we'll say forest, then we have the Arctic zone, and then finally we have the volcano zone. Now, the reason that we're creating this variable specifically is because a lot of the work that we do is using dictionaries, which have keys and values. This table just contains a bunch of different keys. So when we use and loop through this table, it'll loop through in a specific order. So the first iteration is going to go to spawn. The second iteration will be forest, the third will be Arctic, and the fourth will be volcano. Now, the reason that this is important is because when a player opens up the Rebirth shop in our game, let's say they open up the Rebirth shop in the spawn area. We only want to display the items from the spawn zone to the player. Now, if they go to the Arctic zone, for example, and open up the Rebirth shop, we want to display all of the items from the spawn, the forest, and the Arctic zone. But we don't want to display the ones from the volcano zone. So when we start scripting the functionality, we need to figure out what zone the player currently is in, and then what zones come before that area so that we can also display those items as well and not display any items from the zones that are further ahead of the player. Cool. So now we're pretty much done with this. We're going to go ahead and save that and close that script. Next, let's go ahead and actually update the player's data. So to do this, we'll go inside the replicated storage, inside the player data folder, and open up the template. Now, the player data that we're actually going to add here is for every time a player purchases something from the Rebirth shop. So for instance, we want to let the player purchase 3 of each pet from the Rebirth shop. And to make that possible, we need to track every single time the player purchases one of those pets so that we know how many more times the player can purchase that specific pet. The same goes for the Rebirth buns as well. We only want the player to be able to purchase those Rebirth buns one single time. Now, inside of the template module script, I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable called default_rebirth_shop_purchases, which is going to be set to a blank table. Then we want to loop through the Rebirth shop. So we're going to say for area, comma info in Rebirth config.shop do. We'll then index the default Rebirth shop purchases table with the specific area, and we're going to set that equal to a blank table. Then what we want to do is loop through the buns and the pets table. First, we'll start off off with the buttons. So we're going to say for button, comma button info in info.buttons do. Then what we're going to do is index the default Rebirth shop purchases with the specific area, and then we'll index that specific area table with the specific button, and we're going to set that equal to false by default because of course the player has not purchased the button by default. Then what we're going to do is loop through the pets. So what I'm just going to do is copy and paste this, and then we'll update the variables. So pet, pet info, and info.pets. Then once again, we're going to index this variable with a specific area, and then we're going to index the specific area with the pet name, and we're going to set that equal to 3 because we want the player to be able to purchase the pet 3 times. And now we're done with that function. So what we're going to do is grab our variable right here and add that to the player data directly down here. So we're going to say Rebirth shop equals, and then the default Rebirth shop purchases right there. Awesome. So now that we've done that, we're done with the template script and we can close that. Next, we can begin scripting the GUI, but first let's add the networking to this. So we're going to go inside the replicated storage, inside the remotes folder, and we're going to add a brand new remote event to this. This remote event is going to be called purchase Rebirth item. And there we go. We now have that remote event created and we're done with that folder. Next, we'll begin scripting the GUI. So we're going to go inside of the start player, inside of the start player scripts, open up the GUI folder. And then as usual, I'd like to duplicate one of these scripts because it gives us a bunch of our starting variables. So I'm going to duplicate the pet bank script and I'm going to rename this to Rebirth shop. Then we'll open the script up. Now inside of here, we can delete all of the functions. So let's go ahead and do that. After we delete all the functions, we can delete a lot of the variables as well. So let's just go ahead and delete pretty much all of them. Cool. So now working our way down from the top, we do need the workspace service. We also need the replicated storage and the player service as well. Then for our modules, we're actually going to need quite a few modules. So we are going to need the state manager. We're also going to need the pet utils, but we don't need the pet bank config. We do need the Rebirth config though. So let's go ahead and add that. In addition to the Rebirth config, we also want to get the pets config. After the pets config, we also want the island config. And then we're going to want a few of our more general libraries. So we're going to say .libs. And this time we want to get the viewport model module. So we're going to say viewport model. In addition to that library, we also want to get the format number .simple module. So we're going to say format number. And now we have all the modules that we actually need. Then go into the remotes variable. We want to just say replicated storage .remote because we're not using the pet remotes this time. We then have our player variable and the player GUI. And then we have the GUI variable, which is set to pet bank currently, but it should be set to the Rebirth shop. We then have our frame variable, which is perfect. And then let's start creating some more variables for the elements of this GUI. So we'll create a variable called container, which is going to be set to frame.container. We'll also create a variable called pets button, which is going to be set to frame.buttons.pets. And then we can duplicate this. And this time we're going to say buttons, and we'll rename this variable to buttons button. Although that sounds very odd, that's what we'll go with. And then we'll get one more button, which is going to be the exit button. And that's of course going to be set to frame.exit. We'll then create a variable for the template, which is inside of the container. So container.template. Now for how our GUI is going to work, there's going to be 2 different modes to this GUI. The first mode is going to be the pet mode. Whenever the player opens up the GUI, it's going to display all the pets the player can actually purchase for rebirthing. And the second mode is when they click on the buttons button, and that'll display all the rebirth buttons the player can purchase. So we're going to create a type for this, which is going to be called mode, and that's going to be set to a string, which is either going to be pet or button. We'll then create a variable called mode, which is going to be set to pet by default. And we also want to set the type of this variable to be the mode type. And then we also want to create a variable for the area as well, which by default is going to be set to spawn. Now the last variable that we're going to create is going to be a constant, which is going to be called layout order limit. And this is going to be set to a negative number, which is actually the lowest value that you can set for any GUI object's layout order property. And that number is 2_147_483_648. Now the underscores don't actually matter. It just makes it much easier to read this number. And you can think of it as a replacement for commas because you can't use commas here when separating big numbers. So like I said, this is the lowest value that you can set a GUI object's layout order to. And the reason that we're creating this variable is because we're going to be using it when calculating the layout order for each of the different objects because we need them to be displayed in a specific order. With that being said, we're basically done creating all the variables that we're going to need. Let's go ahead and create our usual generate models function. And to do this, we're just going to grab that from the pet rainbow script. So we're going to go to the generate parts function. We're going to copy this, close the script, and then we're going to paste that directly inside of here. Instead of calling this generate parts, I like to call this generate models. So we're going to loop through all the descendants in the workspace. Instead of looking for the model named pet rainbow, we're going to actually look for the model named Rebirth shop. Now, as usual, this string right here is very important. It needs to be the exact string of the name of the model that we're using. Otherwise, we won't be able to identify and find that model, so we can't script it. Now that we found that model, though, we're going to listen for the primary part of it to be touched. And whenever it is touched, we want to get the player. And if we are able to get the player, we're going to check if the player equals the local player. And we want to make sure that the GUI is not enabled. And then for right now, we're just going to set the GUI to be enabled. Cool. So now that we've created that function, let's go ahead and call it at the bottom of our script. Now above that function, let's go ahead and create another function, which is going to be called display GUI. And this is actually going to take an argument called area, which is going to be a string. Now inside of this function, we want to set our area variable equal to the area passed to this. After that, we're then going to enable the GUI and set that to true. And now that we've done that, let's go ahead and actually call this function. And we're going to call this function inside of our generate models function when we listen for the part to be touched. touched. Now the first thing that we want to do though is actually create a variable for the area, which is going to be equal to the descendant.parent.name. So remember where we stored each of these models at. We stored one inside of the spawn folder, one inside of the Arctic folder, and one inside of the volcano folder. Now how are we able to get the area when a player touches the model? Well, remember, descendant is the model, and then we want to look for the parent, and of course the parent is going to be one of these folders named after a specific area, so then we want to get its name. And now that we've gotten the area, we're then going to go ahead and call the display GUI function and pass through the area. Awesome. So next what we're going to do is above our display GUI function is create a brand new function, which is going to be called generate pets. Now the first thing that we're going to do inside of here is create a variable called max price, which is going to be equal to negative math.huge. We'll then create another variable called min price, which is going to be equal to math.huge. Then after that, we're going to loop through the Rebirth shop variable. So we're going to say for area, comma info in Rebirth config.shop do. We then want to loop through the pets table inside of here as well. So for pet, comma pet info in info.pets do. We're then going to set the max price variable equal to the math.max. And then we're going to pass through the max price as well as the info.price. Now, all that math.max does is it just returns whatever the largest number is from the arguments that we pass to it. So for instance, if max price equals 0 and the info.price equals 10, then this function is going to return 10. But for instance, if max price equals 10 and info.price equals 9, then it's going to return 10, which is max price. So now that we set max price, we then want to set min price, which is going to be equal to math.min, and then we're going to pass through min price as well as info.price. Now, the reason that we're doing this is to be able to calculate and set the specific layout order of each of the different elements. Remember when I said we commonly use dictionaries, and when you use dictionaries, you're not able to loop through a dictionary in a specific order. It's entirely random. You're only able to loop through an array in a specific order. So when we're generating the pets, we're not really able to specify which pets get generated first before the other pets. So since we're unable to do that, we then have to find an alternative way of setting their layout order, and that's what we're going to be doing here. We're setting the pet's layout order based off price. And at least in my game, it only makes sense that every single time a player unlocks a new item in the Rebirth shop, that item is going to cost more than the previous item did. So if one of the items costs 500, the next item that they unlock is going to cost 501, just to give you an example in here. Cool, so now that we set both of those variables, we once again want to loop through the Rebirth config shop. So again, we're going to say for area, comma info in Rebirth shop.shop do, and then we want to loop through the pets table as well. So for pet, comma pet info in info.pets do. We'll then clone the template, so template clone. We of course want to parent that to the container. Then after we parent it, we're going to create a variable called scaled layout order, which is going to be equal to something very long. Now for this method to even work, I have to give all credit to ChatGPT because I was having this dilemma of how the best way is to handle the layout order, and I asked ChatGPT and they gave me a solid solution. Now keep in mind, I'm not great when it comes to math, so I'm not able to explain exactly how this works, and I also really don't care. If I was working on a normal project just like this and it was such a simple small thing, I wouldn't care about the math in that project neither. I just know that it works, the layout order is set up correctly, and the only other time that I'd think about it is if it was not working for some reason, and then I'd come back to it and change it. Anyway, for this variable, we're going to say math.floor, then we want to add some parentheses to this, and we're going to add more parentheses to this, and we're first going to say info.price minus the min price. Then outside of those first parentheses, let me add spaces here just to make it even easier to see. So after those parentheses, we're then going to divide that by more parentheses, and this time we're going to say max price minus min price, and then we're going to go out of these parentheses, but those all belong in one specific parentheses, so you can hopefully see that there, but let me kind of like move that again. So you see all these parentheses. I know this is going to be a little confusing, but just try to stick with me now. Then after that, we're going to multiply that, and then we want to create some more parentheses. This time we're going to say layout order limit, and then we want to subtract something from that number, but we need to make more parentheses, and this time we want to say -1. Then we're going to go outside of those parentheses, and finally we want to add the layout order limit to this. So this is the whole line of code right here. Hopefully you're able to copy it and see it easily. I'm just trying to put some spacing between each of these double parentheses to hopefully make it easier for you to see, copy, and understand. If for some reason you're having an issue with this, there's probably a comment down below which contains this line of code in there. You can just copy it from the comments because man, this is a very long line of code, and all it is really just a bunch of math to calculate the layout order. Anyways, now that we have the calculated layout order, what we're then going to do is set the layout order property of the clone equal to the scaled layout order. After that, inside of the clone, we have a title text label, and we want to set the text of this equal to the pet. Then inside of the clone, we also have the price text label, and we want to set the text of this equal to the format number, format compact, and we want to format the info.price. Then inside of the icon frame, we have the viewport frame, and we want to set the visibility of this equal to true. After we've done that, inside of the clone, we have the buy button, and we want to listen for that to be clicked. And whenever that is clicked, we're going to actually fire the purchase rebirth item remote event. So fire server, and we're going to pass through pet as well as the area and the pet's name as well. So the pet string right here is to indicate what mode the shop is currently in. So we're going to say to the server, hey, we're in the pet mode. This is the area that we're in, and this is the pet that we want to purchase. So here's all the information. Purchase it for us. And the last thing we want to do with this clone is we actually want to set two attributes of it. So we're going to say set attribute. We want to set the area attribute, and we want to set the area attribute to the specific area. And then we're going to set another attribute. This time we want to set the pet attribute, which is going to be set to the specific pet. Cool. And now we're done with that function. Now you might be wondering, why did we not generate the viewport frame? Why do we not do a lot of the other things that we probably need to do inside of here? The reason for that is because we're going to create another function in a little bit called update children. And rather than setting some of those things inside of this function, we're going to set those specific things inside of that function, because otherwise we would just be basically copying and pasting code when realistically we don't need to. Next, what we're going to do is we're actually just going to copy and paste this function, and we're going to rename this from generate pets to generate buns. We're still going to have the max and the min price. This time though, instead of looping through the pets table, we want to loop through the buns table. So we'll say button and button info. Oh, and I actually just called myself. I almost made a mistake. Inside of here, we're saying info.price, but info is the table which has pets and buns inside. We actually want to say button info.price. So we're going to copy and paste that there. And then we can go back up to our generate pets function, and we want to fix that up here as well. So instead of saying info, we want to say pet info. Cool. So going back down to generate buns, we then need to pretty much update this for loop right here as well. So instead of looping through the pets, we want to loop through the buns. We're going to say bun info and button. Then we're going to clone the template again. We're going to parent that to the container again. We're going to scale the layout order the same way. We're going to set the layout order the same way. Now for the text of the title text label, we're going to create a brand new string, and we're going to say add. Then we're going to use format number dot format compact, and then we want to use toNumber on the bun. The reason that we need to use toNumber is because remember, the button key inside of our table is actually set to a string. So that's why we need to use toNumber on it to make it into a number, and then we can use format compact on it to format that number. And then after we display the number, we want to say Rebirth bun. So for instance, add 100 Rebirth bun or add 50 Rebirth bun. We'll then set the price the same way, and instead of making the viewport frame visible, we actually want to make the icon image label visible. And then additionally, inside of the clone, we have the left text label, and we want to make this not visible because we only want the player to be able to purchase one bun ever. Then once again, we're going to listen for the player to click the buy button, and when they do, we're going to fire the purchase Rebirth item remote event. This time though, we want to pass through the button string, then the area, and then the bun as well. Then for setting the attributes, we want to still set the area, which is perfect, but this time instead of setting pet, we want to actually set bun. So let's set that to the bun, just like that. Cool. Now that we've created both those functions, let's go ahead and call them below where we call the generate models function. So generate pets and generate buns. Now after that, we're going to go below the generate buns function, and we're going to create a new function, which is going to be called update children. Inside of here, we're going to loop through all the children inside of the container. So container get children do. Now, if the child is not a frame or the child's name is unlocked, then we just want to continue looping through the other children. After that, we're going to create a variable called area, which is going to be a string, and that's going to be set the child get attribute, and we want to get the area attribute. We can then copy and paste this. This time we want to get the pet attribute, so we're going to say pet, which is also going to be equal to a string, and then we can copy and paste that one more time, and this time we want to get bun attribute, which of course is going to be equal to a string, but we're going to rename that variable to bun. Cool. So now that we've gotten those attributes, what we're then going to do is we're going to say if pet then. So now if we know that this is one of our pet frames, what we want to do is we're going to create a variable called info, which is going to be set to rebirth config.shop. We're going to index that shop with the specific area, and now that we've got that areas table, we want to get the pets table, and we want to index the pets table with the specific pet. Now that we've gotten the pet info, let's then go ahead and we actually have to create a pet instance, which of course is of the pet instance type. So that's going to be equal to a blank table for right now. We're going to set the UUID just equal to a blank string. We're going to set the name equal to the pet's name. We're going to set the model equal to the pet as well. Then for the rarity, we're going to set that equal to info.rarity. Then for the level, we're going to set that equal to info.level or 0. And we can copy and paste that. And this time we're going to do the same thing for the experience. So if we did set the experience property or the level property inside of there, then it'll be set to that. Otherwise, it's just going to be set to 0. And now the reason that we're not doing this with the rarity property is because we're always going to define the pet's rarity inside of there. After that, we're going to say equipped. That's going to be set to false. We're also going to set lock to false as well. Then we have the pet's upgrades. So shiny, for example, is going to be set to info.shiny or false. Then we have golden, which is going to be set to info.golden or false. And finally, we have rainbow, which again, info.rainbow or false. Now the last property that we have to set on here is the enchantment property, which is going to have an enchantment equal to nil and a level equal to nil as well. Cool. Now we've created our pet instance. After that, we want to check if the player has discovered the pet before, because shortly we're going to generate the viewport frame, which we want to either display a black model if the player has never seen that pet before, or we'll display the normal model because the player has seen the pet before. So we're going to say local is unlocked, and that's going to be equal to the state manager.getData.petIndex, and then we're going to index that with the pet's name. Then we're going to create create a variable for the model, and if the pet is unlocked, then we're going to use the petsconfig.getModel, and we're going to pass through the pet instance. Otherwise, if the pet is not unlocked, then we're going to say pet.utils, get hidden pet model, and we're going to pass through the pet's name. Now that we've gotten the model, let's go ahead and actually clean the viewport frame. So child.icon.viewportFrame. Now that we've cleaned the viewport frame, let's go ahead and actually generate it. So generate viewport, we're going to pass through the child.icon.viewportFrame, the model, and of course, cframes.angles, 0, math.rad, -90, 0. Cool, so now we've generated the viewport frame. Next, what we want to do is update the left text label to display how many more times the player can purchase this specific pet. So we're going to say local amount left equals state manager.getData.rebirth shop, and then we want to index this with the specific area as well as the specific pet. We'll then say child.left and set the text of that text label equal to the amount left right beside the word left. So for instance, 1 left, 2 left, 3 left, or 0 left. Now that we've updated that text label, we also want to update the buy button as well. So if the amount left equals 0, then we want to update the background color 3 of the buy button, and we're going to set it to a gray color. In addition to that, inside of the buy button, there's a text label called title, and we want to set the text color 3 of that equal to another color as well. And we're going to set that to a little bit of a lighter gray. And then of the title text label, we also want to update the text to say none left. So that's what the button's going to look like if the player cannot buy anymore. Otherwise, if the player still is able to buy some, then what we're going to do is just copy and paste all of this. Now we want the background color of the button to be green, and we're going to want the text color to be white, and we want the text to say buy. And that's all the stuff that we actually have to update for the pet child. Now let's work on if the child is a bun. Now if we are updating a bun, what we're going to do is check if it has been purchased. And to see if it has been purchased, we're going to use the state manager.getData. We'll look inside of the Rebirth shop table. We're going to index that with a specific area, and then we'll index that with a specific bun. Now if the bun has been purchased, then what do we want to do? Well, once again, we want to update the buy button. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste all of this inside of here. And that's all that we have to do. We're going to update it the exact same way. So if it already has been purchased, then we're going to display none left and then change the colors. Otherwise, if the player is still able to buy it, then we're going to update it the same way that we would for the pet frame. And now that we're done with creating this update children function, what we're going to do is call it after we call both the generate functions. So after we generate all the buns, this function will then go through and update all of them the way that they should be. Now, after we've done that, we're going to go below that function and above the display GUI function and create a new function. This function is going to be called update displayed items. And what we're going to use this function for is choosing which items should be displayed inside of the GUI. So like I've said before, if the player is inside of the volcano area, then we wanted to show all the items before the volcano and the volcano area, but none of the items after the volcano area. So the first thing that we'll do inside this function is create a variable called area number, which is going to be equal to table.find. And remember that table we created earlier inside of the islands config? Well, we're going to say islands config.island order, and then we want to look for the current area inside of there. Then after we do that, we're going to loop through all the children inside of the container. So container get children do. Now again, we're going to use the same if statement that we did up here for the update children function. So I'm just going to actually copy and paste that inside of here. So if the child is not a frame or the child's name is unlocked, then we'll just continue looping through the children. Next, what we'll do is update the buns based on the specific mode. So if the mode is set to pet, then no bun should be displayed, and vice versa. If the mode is set to bun, then no pet should actually be displayed. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if not child, get attribute, and we're going to look for the mode attribute, which is going to be either bun or pet. Then what we're going to do is set the visibility of that child to false. So for example, if the mode is set to bun, but the child does not have a bun attribute, then we know that that child should not actually be displayed. Now we're also going to check something else here. So we're going to say else if child.name does not equal template then. So considering we're using else if here, we know that this child does actually have that attribute. So it most likely should be displayed, but what we now need to decide is based off the area that the player is in. So as we're looping through here, we're going to be thinking, is the player currently in the spawn area? And if the player is in the spawn area, we shouldn't display anything after the spawn area, of course. So we'll create a variable inside of here called child area, which is going to be a string, and that's going to be equal to the child get attribute, and we're going to get the area attribute. Now that we've gotten the child's area, we're going to create a variable called child area number, which is going to be set similar to how we did earlier, table.find. We're going to look through the islands config.island order table, and we're going to look for the child area. Then we'll set the visibility of the child, and this is going to be based on if the child area number is less than or equal to the area number. Okay, so if you're confused at all as to how this is exactly working, let's say for instance, the area the player is currently in is the spawn area. So what table.find will return and what area number will be set to is 1, because spawn is the first area that the player is actually in. Then after that, when we get the child's area and we get the child's area number, let's say for instance that this child belongs to the volcano area. So what table.find will return is 4, because we have spawn as 1, forest as 2, Arctic as 3, and volcano would be number 4 in the list. So if 4 is less than or equal to 1. So then when we set the visibility of this, we're thinking, is the child area number less than the area number? And for this example, we can say, is 4 less than or equal to 1? And since it's not, this would not become visible. Awesome. And now we're done with that function. Let's actually use it. Where do we want to use it? Inside of our display GUI function, and we want to call it after we set the area variable. So we're going to call update displayed item, and this is bothering me a little bit, so I'm going to update the name to displayed items because it should be plural. Then after that, above the display GUI function, we're going to create another function called update mode. This function is going to accept the mode argument, and when we call this function, we want to set the mode variable equal to whatever mode is passed through to this function. After we do that, we then want to update the text of the title text label to say, first we want to say Rebirth, and then we're going to display whatever the mode is, but we want to make the mode uppercase, so we're going to call the upper mode function on that, and then after that, we'll put an S here. So for instance, it's going to say Rebirth pets, or it'll say Rebirth buttons. And then after we update the text of the title text label, we're then going to call update displayed items, because since we're changing the mode, we now want to display different items, of course. Cool, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and start scripting some of the buttons. So we're going to say pets button, that mouse button one click, connect that to an anonymous function, and inside of here, all we want to do is call the update mode function and pass through pet. We can then copy and paste this. This time we'll script the buttons button, and of course we just want to pass through button. We can then copy and paste this once again. This time we'll script the exit button, and of course all we want to do is set the GUI to no longer be enabled, so we're going to set that to false. After that, we'll add the networking inside of here as well, so we'll say remotes.purchase rebirth item.onClient event. We're going to connect that to an anonymous function, and now the arguments of this function is going to be mode, and of course that's going to be the mode. We'll also get the area, which is going to be a string, and the item, which is also going to be a string as well. And we actually don't need any of those arguments, but it does give us more context so that it's easier to understand this code. We'll then say task.delay 0, and then we'll create an anonymous function inside of here, and then we're going to call update children. So when we call update children, that'll basically refresh the GUI and update all the children that need to be updated because we purchased one of those items. Awesome. So with all that being said, we're pretty much done on the client side of things, at least scripting the GUI, and now we can go ahead and start scripting this on the server side. So going inside of our server script service, we first want to actually update the Rebirth module script that we have inside of here. So we want to go to the unlock button function right here, and what we're actually going to do is copy and paste that. We're then going to rename this to force unlock button, which is going to have the same arguments. It's going to also get the profile, but it's not going to take into account. It'll only take into account if it has been unlocked yet. After we check if it's already been unlocked, we don't need to adjust the gems, but we do want to update the player's data, and then we also want to fire this remote event off as well. And the reason that we're creating this function is because the unlock button function right here takes into account price, which when we actually handle the player purchasing any of the Rebirth items, we're going to handle the price over there. So we don't want to handle the price 2 times. That's why we're just going to create this function right here. Now, after we've done that, we're going to go ahead and add a brand new script to the server script service, and we're going to rename this to Rebirth Shop. Instead of here, we're going to need some of our common variables, so let's go ahead and get the server script service. In addition to the server script service, we also want to get the replicated storage, and then we need to require some modules. So first, we of course need to get the player's data, which is going to be equal to require server script service.playerData.manager. We'll then copy and paste this. This time, instead of getting the player data manager, we actually want to get the Rebirth manager. So let's go ahead and require that Rebirth module script, and we'll rename this variable to Rebirth manager. We then also want to get the pet manager. So let's get that pets module script, and we're going to say pets manager. We then also want to get the Rebirth config, which is inside of the replicated storage. So replicated storage.configs.rebirths, and we'll rename this to Rebirth config. Then finally, we'll get our remotes variable, which of course is equal to replicated storage.remotes. Awesome. Now that we've created all those variables, the first thing that we'll do is add the networking inside of here. So we'll say remotes.purchase rebirth item.onServer event, and we're going to connect that, but we won't connect it to anything yet. Then what we'll do is above here, we'll create a brand new function, which is going to be called purchase item. That'll accept a player, which is a player, a mode, which is a string, an area, which is a string, and an item, which is also a string. Cool. So now that we've just initialized that function, we can actually connect our remote event to that specific function. And now that we've done that, we can actually start really creating this function. So the first thing we'll do is create a variable called area config, which is going to be equal to the Rebirth config.shop. And then we're going to index this shop with the specific area. If for some reason we're not able to find that area config, then we want to stop the function right there. After that, we want to get the item config, which will be equal to the area config. And then we're going to index this with a brand new string. And this string is going to consist of the mode with an S at the end of it. The mode is going to be pet or button. So when we index the area config, we need to make that plural because that's how our tables are set up in the config, pets or buttons, not pet or button. And then after we do that, we're going to index that table with the specific name of the specific item. Now, if we're not able to find that item config, then we want to stop the function right there as well. After that, we'll go ahead and get the player's profile, which is of course equal to playerData.profiles, index that with the specific player. If we're not able to find the profile, again, we just want to stop the function right there. We then are going to check if the area that the player is currently in is actually unlocked. This is kind of a form of anti-cheat. You don't need to include this, but it's definitely smart too if you want to prevent players from being able to purchase from any shop, even though they don't actually have that area unlocked yet. So we're going to say local is area unlocked, and that's going to be equal to either the area being spawned or the profile.data.islands, and then we're going to index that with the specific area. Now, if the area is not unlocked, then again, we're going to stop the function right there. After that, we want to check if the item has been purchased. So we'll say profile.data.rebirth shop and index that with the area. Then we'll index the area with the specific item. Now, if is purchased equals true or is purchased equals 0, then we want to stop the function right there. Because every time we purchase a pet, we're going to subtract 1 from that player's data. Otherwise, if the player buys a bun, we're going to set the player data for that specific bun equal to true. And that's how we can easily tell if the item has been purchased or purchased to its maximum limit. After that, we'll go ahead and get the price, which of course is going to be equal to itemconfig.price. Then we'll create a variable called can'afford, and that'll be equal to the profile.data.gems is greater than or equal to the price. Now, if the player is not able to afford it, then what do we want to do? Well, we want to stop the function right there. Now that we know that the player can actually afford it, we then want to subtract the cost from the player's gems. So we're going to say adjust gems, we'll pass through the player, and then we'll subtract the amount from the player's gems. After that, we're then going to check if the mode equals bun, and if the mode does equal bun, then what we want to do is go inside of the player's data, inside of the Rebirth shop, we're going to index that with a specific area as well as the specific item, and we're going to set that equal to true. So that's how we're updating the player's data to tell if they've purchased this bun before. And now that we update the player's data for them purchasing the bun, we then also want to reward them with the Rebirth bun. So we're going to say Rebirth manager dot force unlock bun. We'll pass through the player as well as the specific Rebirth bun, which is the item. We'll then say else inside of this if statement. So if the mode is not bun, then of course the mode is going to be equal to pet. Let's go ahead and update the player's data. So profile.data.rebirth shop, again, index that with the area and index that with the specific item, but we're going to say minus equals 1. So remember, this data by default is set to 3. Whenever a player purchases one of them, we want to subtract 1 from that number. So 3 would become 2, 2 would become 1, and 1 would become 0. Now that we've tracked the pet being purchased, what we're then going to do is create the pet instance, which is going to be equal to pets manager dot create pet. We're going to pass through the pet's name as well as the pet's rarity. And then for the upgrade, well, let's actually create a variable for this. So we're going to say upgrade equals if item config dot rainbow, then rainbow. Else if item config dot golden, then golden. Else if item config dot shiny, then shiny. And we'll finally say else nil. So if the pet does have a rainbow property, then the upgrade will be set to rainbow. If the pet has a golden property, it'll be set to golden. If it has a shiny property, it'll be set to shiny. And if the pet has none of those properties, then upgrade will be set to nil. And we can use that variable right here. So now that we've created the pet instance, let's actually give the pet to the player. So we'll say pets manager dot give pet. We'll pass through the player as well as the pet instance. Awesome. So now with this if statement, we're tracking the purchase and then we're also rewarding the player for that purchase. And finally, the last thing we want to do is actually fire off that remote event. So we'll say remote event dot purchase rebirth item, fire client, we'll pass through the player, we'll pass through the mode, we'll pass through the area, and we'll pass through the item as well. Awesome. So just like that, we're pretty much done with the whole scripting side of things. Let's go back, look inside of our workspace and set the UI visibility to true so that we can actually see it. Now going inside of our start GUI, let's go ahead and open up the Rebirth shop GUI. Inside of here, we're going to go inside of the container and we want to set the template visibility to false because we don't want to see that by default. And then we also want to set the enable property of the Rebirth shop GUI to false as well so that we don't see that by default. Ugh, and it looks like I made one mistake, which I kind of made earlier, but I thought I fixed. Right here where we set the scaled layout property, we use info.price. Again, we want to use petinfo.price, so that's why we have to do that. And the same thing for this price variable right here. We need to update info.price to petinfo.price. Now go into the generate buns function. We want to do the same thing for here as well. So buninfo.price and buninfo.price, just like that. Along with that, one more thing that we need to do is when we generate this clone, we also have to set the name of this to something other than template. It really doesn't matter, but we'll just set the name of it equal to the pet. And then if we go down to the buns, we'll just set the name of this equal to the specific bun. We also want to update how we specify the layout order because turns out there's a slight bug in this, so we have to change this. What we want to do, go towards the top of our script where we have our layout order limit variable, and we're going to rename this to max layout order. And we're just going to set this to a positive number with the same value. But I'm also going to reduce this number by 1, so it'll end with a 7 instead of an 8. Then what we'll do is create a variable below this called min layout order, which is going to be set to negative max layout order. Now that we have those variables created, let's go down to where we set our scale layout order. And inside of here, we're still going to subtract the min price from the petinfo.price. We'll still then divide that by the max price minus the min price. But this time, we actually want to multiply it by the max layout order minus the min layout order. And then we want to add the min layout order to this at the end. And now that we've done that, let's go ahead and copy and paste that right here. We'll replace petinfo with buninfo so we can get the correct price. We then are going to go inside of our start GUI, inside of our Rebirth shop, inside of the container, and go to the unlock frame. And we want to set the layout order of this equal to that number. So 2147483 And now that we've set that number, we need to update the max layout order to be 1 less than that. So we're going to set that to 646 at the end, just like that. Now, originally, the whole reason why I was doing the layout order the way I was doing was to prevent even having to update the layout order of the unlock frame. But now that I realize the simplest method for us to continue through this would be to update the unlock frame's layout order, that's what we're going to do. And one of the final things that we need to do is actually update the state manager. So go inside of the replicated storage, inside of the client folder, we'll open up the state module script right here and scroll all the way down. We'll then just copy and paste any of these remote events. So we'll say remotes.purchase rebirth item, .onClient event, connect, and then for the function, it's of course going to accept the mode, which is going to be a string, the area, which is going to be a string, and the item, which is also going to be a string as well. Then what we're going to do is similar to how we handle setting the data inside of the Rebirth shop. So if the mode is equal to bun, then we need to set the data a specific way. Otherwise, if the mode is set to pet, then we need to handle that data a different way as well. So what I'll do is actually just copy and paste this inside of here. And then we want to add an end statement to here as well to fix that up. So if the mode is equal to bun, then what do we want to do? Well, we want to say player data dot rebirth shop. We want to index that with the area, index that with a specific item, and then set that equal to true. Otherwise, if we're in the pet mode, then we're going to say player data dot rebirth shop, index that with the area, index that with the item, and then subtract 1 from that number. Now we can start this up and test out our game. So go into the volcano area. Let's go ahead and open up the Rebirth shop. We can see inside of here, we have all these different pets that we can actually purchase, and we can see the unlock frame at the very bottom where it actually should be. Then if we click Rebirth buns, we can see all of the buns inside of here that we're able to purchase. Now I'm going to go ahead and rebirth one more time to get some gems, and I'll purchase another bun. Now we see that we've purchased that bun, and we can see that the bun appears inside of here, so that's working perfectly. I'll also purchase the golden dog pet. We have 0 left that we can purchase, and if we look inside of our pet inventory, we can actually see all 3 of the dog pets inside of there. So this is all working perfectly. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. As always, if you guys did enjoy the video or did help you out, make sure you smash the like button, also to subscribe button, and turn post notifications on so you get notified every time I upload a brand new episode. Of course, I have a Patreon if you guys like to support me and gain access to all the scripts and the game file that I made during this episode. There's a link down below in the description, and you guys are going to check that out. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next episode.